What's up, guys? Frugal BC today, and just give me a second. We're gonna do some really cool stuff. Shoot, I didn't save it. Okay. We're gonna be looking at a space that where some of the crypto folks from Tezos, Algorand, Cardano all got together to dispute this kind of zombie blockchain narrative. And I thought it'd be a good reason to go live today. We can kind of go through it together. Wasn't sure if I was even going to go live today. I have something later on. Usually, I kind of do it in the afternoon, but I've got some stuff going on later in the afternoon. But I thought we'd do this now, so I thought it might be fun. So we got one chat already. This is from Het School 11. It says hello, hello, Het School. How you doing? I think you've seen you on the stream before, so welcome back. I just have to find this. I have to actually find this this chain. I think I can. So just give me a second to find it. Meanwhile, let me bring up the crypto prices for you. Oops, sorry, that was the wrong thing. Here's the share. God, it's almost like I forgot how to do this here. Watch glitches. I don't know what that means. Who's crypto? But hello. Yeah. So I'm just gonna bring up. I'm just going to bring up the charts today. As you can see, Algorand getting to 19 cents. It's kind of nice to be back on the upswing a little bit. I just want to I know I have their, I'm sure I can find it here. Here we go. In the meantime, how's everyone doing out there today? You guys feeling good about the price starting to turn around again? I really think this little section here, I think this is kind of a dip before the real Bitcoin, the real bull run coming up. I think that's coming. Shoot, where did it go? Okay, it's going to take me a second. Oh, here it is. So I'll share this. I'll share that in a second. At School 11 says, imagine calling algo a zombie chain, even though on-chain activity is nuts nowadays. Yeah, and we had some news that, in fact, I'll probably share that at some point. Let's see, can I share this without? Yeah, I can. Just give me a second. Oh yeah, here it is. Here, I'll share this. I think this is I think I can share this without giving away too much here. Yeah, the quarter one transparency report just landed. Big news. Algorand transactions grew by 290% quarter over quarter, and TVL grew by 5%. Remember, TVL is kind of a tricky metric too, because TVL is usually measured in dollars. So the price of the coin is factored in, as well as, like, say, the number of transactions, or the number of coins is locked into transactions is one thing, but the price of that will change that number. So it'd be cool if there was a way to kind of standardize that amongst chains, because, like, that number will fluctuate depending on how much the coin has gone up and down. So it doesn't, like, if the value locked can be a little bit misleading. But that's a good quarter over quarter number, 290%. And I don't know when they calculated this. This came out a few days ago when Algorand was a lot lower. So anyway, I just wanted to share that. I'm going to go back to here really quick, and we're going to get to that really soon. Just want to see how people are doing. Yeah, so I wasn't sure if I was going to go live today. Oh no, my focus is out of focus. Okay, now it's back. So I put it on manual focus, and it seems to be working, although for some reason, for a few seconds there, I was out of focus for whatever reason, which is weird. But Yeah, we're gonna get to the spaces. We're just gonna kind of watch this together. I might pause it for commentary here and there. Um, yeah, we can see if you guys want to. Oh, one other thing I want to talk about, actually. Hold on. Let me just pull this up here. Oh, what the heck? Okay, it won't even go to my. Oh wait, here it is. Okay, so I wanted to point this out because I do have a Substack, and I want to talk about this just a little bit before we get into the spaces, because I do have a. Oh, did I check? It is using the right? Just want to make sure it's, yeah, okay. Yeah, one thing I like about this Talk Studio platform from Streamlabs is it recognizes my mic. Also, hello, Catlin Guzman. How you doing? Welcome to the show. Good to see you. Glad I was able to come on at a time that you're able to make it. I like this. I like this platform because it recognizes my mic. With the other one I was using, if I didn't purposely change it, because you would think, like, if someone has a plugged in mic, you would want to default to the plugged in mic because clearly that's going to be better than whatever's on board. So it seems crazy to like default to like the computer mic, which is terrible. So sometimes I'd listen back to a live stream and I'd be like, oh, this is terrible. Anyway, I kind of stopped posting on Twitter, and I'm posting more. I'm going to start posting more on Substack, and the main reason for that is I find it really difficult to actually engage with people, and it just seems kind of pointless. It's like you put all this time into these arguments, and people don't like engage with the actual argument that you're talking about. Instead, they instead they just go to ad hom attacks, and it was weird. I had Algorand people attacking me for calling out the zombie thing because I thought and I gave a list of things. I'm like, here's all the things, here's all the reasons I think this is not a zombie chain, which we covered on the stream. Amongst those, the fact that transactions are increasing, monthly users, monthly active users, active wallets are increasing, monthly active users are increasing. Obviously the price actions has sucked, but for Algorand, Hedera was almost included in that, by the way. And then Cardano was included in that. I don't think that's really fair. Um, Tezos was included. I'm not sure. They're in this call, so we're going to listen to this call. It's going to be very interesting. But anyway, it seems like something about Twitter. I don't think it matters who owns it. It just seems like something about Twitter is just wired for the worst kinds of human behavior, and it was sucking up a lot of time, but not. I didn't feel like I was really getting a benefit from it. And besides, I was paying for it. I was paying $8 a month for something that was sucking my bandwidth without really providing much in return. There was some very cool people on Twitter, and so I'm not like totally abandoning it. I did cancel my subscription. You'll see the little check mark for a few more days, I think till the 6th, but I'm going to go into Substack. It's frugalbc.substack.com. And I'm actually going to put a link in the chat if you guys are interested. So if you guys want to subscribe there, feel free. Totally free right now. Maybe we'll do that in the future. Catlin says, happy to catch you live. I'm glad to have you. Glad you were able to catch us live. Who's Crypto says, what is the collective noun for Algorand holders? I don't know. I've heard Algonauts. I don't hear that one much anymore, but I actually like that one. I think it's kind of cool. I don't think it really matters. I hold a lot of stuff, so like I don't really, actually this came up a while back where people were like, I posted something about how I thought Solana sucks compared to Algorand, and someone said, well, oh, that's really worked to, this is one of the Twitter things, someone said, oh, that really works to drive adoption. And I said, well, where's my goal to drive adoption? Like, I'm here just to like analyze this stuff and give you my objective opinion. Like, if something is bad in Algorand, I say it. Like, I've always said it. I've never covered anything up for Algorand. You know, I've pointed out numerous times this price action sucks. I wish it didn't. I don't know why. In fact, my post today. So I want to show you guys this. My latest post is, why do crypto prices go up? Trying to reason with the Bitcoin halving cycle season. That's actually a veiled, for some of you guys now, you'll be in the know. This is sort of a veiled Jimmy Buffett reference. He had a song called Trying to Reason with Hurricane Season, which I always kind of got a kick out of. So I kind of adopted it here to Trying to Reason with Bitcoin halving cycle season. But it's really more about like how it's really hard to determine what drives crypto prices up, or what in terms of price action. Not like, not why is Algorand at one price level typically, and why is Ethereum at another one? Why is Algorand tends to be under $1, where Ethereum tends to be in the thousands? That I kind of understand, but why do some move? Say they all kind of move with Bitcoin halving cycle season, but some move a lot stronger than others. And I kind of go through all the things that people typically talk about and why I don't think those really explain much. And then I kind of give my little theory at the end. You might disagree, but yeah, feel free to check that out. All right. Well, let's see. So we got one more person. Nitram Holtz, welcome to the show. He says, where can we follow the developer activity in Algo? So do you mean, so there, okay, here's a good one. Shoot, what was that called? Hold on. Just give me a second here. I'm going to show you something I found that was kind of cool. Before I do that, though, I really liked ChainTrail. I thought ChainTrail was a good. I think ChainTrail is a good metrics follower, but I really like this new folder. It's called blockpack.app, and I'm going to share it right now. So here it's blockpack.app. So blockpack.app. And so it gives you this. It gives you it depends what you mean by developer activity, by the way. So it gives you price, total nodes, market cap, TVL, all this good stuff. I do kind of wish you could click on this and get like kind of a timeline of it, but that's cool. Average block time, you can see we're under 3 seconds. Total transactions, 1.8 billion. That's a lot of transactions. Current block we're on, average TPS, etc., etc. But then you can go to applications. Oop, that's not it. Oh, here, directory. So this is all the applications that are built. So you can see this is a big zombie chain. Nothing on it. Nothing on it at all. But one thing it took me just a second to notice, these are ordered by last week's transactions. So you can go through and you can see what's using Algorand the most. Right now it's the orange mining, followed by C3, which is a centralized exchange that I had trouble using. I tried it out. World Chess, which mints all the World Chess results onto Algorand blockchain. Very cool. Arbitrage by Planet Watt, Fry Foundation, all the way through Lofty, Folks, Vestige, Fractal, all the way down to Fractal Monsters. By the way, Fractal Monsters, big sponsor of the show. Want to give a big shout out to them. You can, we got links in the description. So if you want to play some Fractal Monsters, you can get a free monster, I believe. I think that's still going on. So you don't even have to buy a monster to play now. And yeah, in fact, I got a free one anyway. Even if you're already playing, they gave you a free one, which I think is kind of cool. Here, block itself. So this one's cool. I like this. I like how they're doing it. Also, a big shout out to non-fungible domains. Look where they are now. They're not using as many transactions, but big fans of non-fungible domains. You can get at .algo address instead of those letters and numbers. Makes using things on Algorand a whole lot easier. So check that out. Both of those in the description. Anyway, that's enough for the thing. Hopefully that answers No, it didn't. Sorry, buddy. He says, thanks. I mean, new developers entering the algo development scene. Yeah, that's a good question. I try to cover new stuff when it comes up. That's really weird. I just noticed, is it the edge? If I go to the edge, is it? Sorry, I get distracted because I just noticed sometimes it goes out of focus, but it's supposed to be manual focus, so I don't know. I don't know why that is. But yeah, new developers. That's a good question. I kind of wish there was a. I don't have a good source for like, except for like I follow things on Twitter. Michael Jordan on Twitter is really good for. In fact, he might be. I think he's mj.algo on Twitter. He's a really great source of info. I get a lot of stuff from him, and you can follow Fred Estante as well. Because yeah, with AlgoKit 2.0, it'd be really interesting to see what new stuff comes of it. Because I'm really curious, will Python? I understand why Python makes it easier, and in fact, one of the things I want to cover yet, I'll probably cover it next week, is the latest Algorand Foundation podcast is really good, and Sean Woods gave a really good explanation of why switching to Python makes a huge difference, and he kind of explained how blockchain development works. I kind of just want to hear it again, so we'll cover that on the stream at some point. Let's see, who's the crypto says shared your Substack with the Crypto GB Facebook group. Well, awesome, appreciate that. Thank you, friend. Who's crypto says I don't fully trust their approach, but it's a start. Who are you talking about? Are you talking about the Algorand Foundation? Well, we got the space pulled up, so should we check this out? So I'm very curious what they're about to say. It's an hour and a half, so I don't know if we're going to go through all of it, but we'll at least go through a big portion of it. Maybe all of it.
And this is going to be an amazing Genzio space. Feel free to click that bottom button on the bottom right-hand corner and share out this space as well. Give it a like, and if you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment as well. We're definitely going to go through those. But until we get all these speakers in the house, we're going to play some music and get this party started.
Awesome. And before
Sorry, that I hope that doesn't kill my monetization. Like, I can get. I didn't know there was going to be music playing. Hopefully that doesn't. Screw up the video, because they can get it to like a takedown notice and stuff like that.
Before we get started, I have a lot to say. I'm super pumped and excited for this space. Just want to.
Oh, and this is interesting. This is the blonde broker. So I covered a talk she did with I think it was someone from Hedera. Like, it was or no, she interviewed the founder of Folks Finance. It was kind of interesting conversation. I thought it was a little like surface level, but sometimes you just kind of have to get through these really quick when you're at a conference. So I get it. Anyway,
I wanted to say welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. Remember to leave a comment bottom right corner if you want to ask a question. Share this space out, bring as many people as you can. This space is all in this together, all about interoperability, decentralization, and the future of crypto and where we are headed. So come one, come all. Get ready for an amazing panel. Before we get started, I want to mention that we have Mars Comics. This is an Algorand artist. They're going to be doing a free 1,000 NFT mint at the end of the space to commemorate this collaboration and everybody coming together. I'm going to go ahead and pin the link of this mint up at the top in the web. Super excited for you guys to be here. Let's get started. Let's do a lovely introduction and pass the mic around the room, make sure everybody's speakers are working. So I'm going to go ahead and give it over to the Algorand account. Let's let everybody say hello. I see we have John. John, would you like to see if your speaker's on?
Yeah, is it working? Can you hear me?
Roger, you sound great.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, thanks for having me. Delighted to be here.
Awesome, thank you, John. We're super excited to have you. Let's see, Bob, is your speaker working?
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I think so. Happy to be here.
I love it. We're getting a great mic check from everyone. Let's see. I think we also have Jeremy. Jeremy, are you here?
Good afternoon. I am indeed.
Awesome. And then Arthur. Arthur, can we get a mic check?
Yes, we can. Can you hear me?
Guys, we're 5 for 5. And last but not least, Charles, can we get a mic check from you?
Mic check, here from warm, sunny Colorado.
I'm jealous. We are checking in from Southeast Asia Blockchain Week. So it is 8 p.m. tonight. It might be daytime for everyone else, but we are coffeeed up, we are wired, we are awake and ready to deliver a wonderful space to everyone. So,
by the way, we got Charles Hoskinson and John Allen Woods. They used to work together at Cardano. John Allen Woods, obviously now the CTO of Algorand.
So thank you guys for the warm introductions. I want to start off and address some of the comments that have been made from a previous Forbes article that went out. The reason why we are all here and gathered today to come together, and we're going to basically talk about the rise of crypto's billion-dollar zombies. We are here united together to celebrate all of the successes that you guys have had in the space. I want to pass the mic around the room and have everyone share a recent success story or win that you've accomplished within your company regarding mass adoption. So I'm going to first pass the mic over to John.
Sure, I'm happy to. I guess on the tech front, we've been making tectonic shifts on Algorand. And so, I mean, over the last 6 months, we have delivered a revolutionary new programming experience for Algorand. So you're building apps on our decentralized blockchain. You can now do so using regular Python and Python tooling. And so this opens up Algorand's development scene to everyone from beginners all the way to data scientists. This year, we're also going to be changing the network topology to be a peer-to-peer network topology, which is going to further decentralize the network. And maybe, one final thing, which is another huge, gargantuan leap in terms of both the infrastructural and philosophical approach that Algorand is using. Is that we're going to be starting to incentivize consensus. And this is the idea that we will shift radically from a model where we didn't pay for block production and block validation or didn't reward that activity to a model where we do reward it. And so I think it's maybe, I've been working with Algorand for nearly 2 years, and it's certainly the greatest shifts I've seen. And this is all while we are breaking new ground in places like Nigeria, India. We're working with organizations like the UNDP, and indeed we are getting serious with like digital euros, working with our checks and tokenizing real world assets. So it's been a pretty busy time.
Yeah, no, we want to commend you for all the work that you guys have done and for putting this space together. We have a lot of stuff to look forward to this year with you guys. Very exciting. Bob, I want to see if you want to hop in there as well.
So hi, everyone. I'm Bob Samuel from the Ethereum Classic Cooperative. Was there a specific question here or just introduction?
You can do an introduction. I'll let everybody talk about their projects too. But I kind of want to hear a recent success story that you guys have had regarding mass adoption, why we're all here together, and also tell us a little bit about yourself.
For sure. Well, let me just mention Proof of Work Summit. So last year, we started a new conference in collaboration with the Litecoin Foundation. So the first instance of that was in Prague last year, and there'll be another one later this year in Europe. And the idea there really was to bring together the major proof of work ecosystems. There have been many Bitcoin conferences, there have been many mining conferences, but to my knowledge, that was the first ever really cross-chain conference around that theme of proof of work. Beyond that, I'll pass on to somebody else.
Yeah, and
that seemed kind of unconvincing. Like she talked about like mass adoption, and it's like, oh, we partnered with this other chain that a lot of people don't think much about these days. That's not super convincing. And I did want to say that, just because I thought Algorand was incorrectly placed in the zombie chain, that doesn't mean that I don't think any of them, that phenomenon doesn't exist. And, I'm just not sure some of these chains probably are going to fall off the wayside. I would have liked to hear a more compelling case for Ethereum Classic. Maybe there is a good reason for it. But something like that just doesn't really, it's not really very convincing.
Also feel free, guys. I'll leave the mic open, so if you want to hop in and tag on to someone else's comment, we can do that. Arthur, I want to give you a brief minute to introduce yourself as well.
Thank you. So I'm a co-founder of the Tezos protocol, and I also happen to sit on the council of the Tezos Foundation. And so Tezos has been going strong now for several years. It's been a year. I would say the past couple of years have been really years of building and transformation with a focus on a scaling roadmap. And I'm super excited because I think within a week from now, we're going to have on the mainnet the launch of Etherlink, which is a roll-up that offers EVM compatibility for legacy applications. And in terms of the successes of the Tezos blockchain, they're successes of its community first and foremost, and we've seen a beautiful and amazing art community flourish on Tezos, which has made the community a wonderful place to be.
I had to slow him down. Even that was him in a regular speed. The rest I've been playing in 1.5. It's crazy.
First off, I want to say congrats on your roll up as well. So we'll be looking forward to that. Everyone, make sure, I want to start the room off too. Make sure you're following these accounts up here. These are massive industry leaders that have really been paving the way for us in the space. Give them a follow. Definitely follow their companies as well. And we're going to continue to do these spaces together. I want to let Charles give a little introduction and hear about some mass adoption successes that he's seen.
Well, hi, everyone. Charles Hoskinson, the CEO of Input Output, and we're one of the companies that's a core protocol developer for Cardano. We're also a venture studio, and we do lots of cool, interesting things. You know, we tend to look at the growth of the Cardano ecosystem from two different lenses. One is the third generation cryptocurrency requirements. So what have we done to contribute to interoperability, scalability, and governance? And then the other lens is basically the adoption of the protocol. So who's using it? What are they doing with it? So with respect to things like scalability, interoperability, and governance, there's been enormous progress in the last 24 months. We finally are actually going to publish the input endorsers paper, Ouroboros Laos. So John, I remember working with you years ago on that. It's been a long road, and it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about that. But there's been just a lot of cool things we've brought in with Hydra, which is a payment state channel system. We now, with Plutus V3 and the upcoming hard fork, support BLS and rollups. So there's a lot of really cool things that can come through that. And we've made a huge amount of progress in just core infrastructure improvements, including balancing out the roadmap. So we started in a very rigorous, similar to Tezos, because they kind of come from the OCaml and Coq world. We come from the Haskell and Agda world, which are kind of twins of each other, just slightly different philosophies, but the same ends of formal methods and high assurance programming. So we started there, and we're starting to balance things out. So we're adding in all kinds of support for new languages, like Aiken, for example, is a Rust dialect, and we have TypeScript coming in as well, which is a great programming language, in addition to having Haskell. On the interoperability side, we merged.
That's really interesting. So they're adding languages too, just like Algorand does. Makes me wonder if, but not Python. Like TypeScript, actually, TypeScript is probably a good one too. In fact, I think, is that the next one? I think John kind of hinted that that's the next one for Algorand too, which I think is really interesting.
Technology from Polkadot called the Parity Substrate Framework, which is probably the best-in-class builder for blockchains. And we took it and we're adding hundreds of thousands of lines of code and a whole bunch of new capabilities to it to launch new chains, like, for example, Midnight, which is a computational privacy solution, but also in general, it's a service layer to the rest of the industry. So it creates bridge and pipes to basically everything in the cryptocurrency space it's relevant to connect to. And in terms of governance, that's really the biggest area of growth. SIP 1694 is a complete on-chain governance system. And so it allows you to do 7 different governance actions, everything from a hard fork to protocol parameter changes to getting access to the $1 billion Cardano treasury, which is kind of our sovereign wealth fund.
So it actually sounds a little more robust than Algorand's governance, because when I think of governance, I think of things that actually impact the chain. Algorand governance has been pretty surface level and like stuff that doesn't seem very impactful at all. It seems like stuff that's pretty unimportant in the grand scheme of things. So that's really interesting.
So it's been 2 years in the making, and we're almost done with it. We're getting to the final parts of testing and configuration, and the stateful operators then have to decide whether that's a good path forward or not. And if it is, we actually have an on-chain government. In terms of adoption, our TVL is up over the last 18 months, more than 300%. Transaction volume's up, wallet count is up, and just a lot of cool new entrants into the ecosystem. The Cardano Foundation, for example, got a great partnership with several agencies, the government of Dubai. They're doing a wine traceability pilot in Georgia. There's a lot of Web3 stuff that's going on. In fact, the space is getting so big, things happen all the time, and I don't even know about it. Like there's a new Cardano client being built through an organization called Pragma, and I got the announcement on Twitter, even though they're creating a Rust node for Cardano, and I was like, wow, this is getting so big, it's hard to know what's going on anymore.
It is, and that you can tell just by having a mega space like this. So we really appreciate you and all that you've done for the community. And yeah, we're super stoked here. Let's see, Arthur or Jeremy.
Yes.
Yeah, did you want to kind of touch a little bit more on?
Were they not paying attention? Like you're like the 4th person. Why does she have to keep explaining it? Jesus.
Mass adoption, a success story. We can move right on into interoperability, whatever you want to do.
Totally. I mean, in terms of success, and I think I'm an engineer at heart, and one of the things I'm most excited about is the amazing R&D that's been going on the protocol over the past couple of years, and what we're working towards. Now, obviously, every advance in a Tezos protocol is subject to on-chain governance. We've had 15 upgrades to this. We are currently voting on 16 upgrades to the network, and they've all happened via on-chain governance, via decision of the bakers and the token holders. But the path that we're on is, I think, a very interesting one. It's really, I would say, taking the best ideas and the best inventions around scalability over the past couple of years and putting it into a coherent whole. So it involves a lot of the work that's been done on optimistic rollup, but also on data availability sampling. And what it enables us to do, because scaling for scaling sake is not that interesting. You could scale to millions of transactions per second, but right now I would say probably the capacity of most blockchains together exceed the demand that there is for transaction. I think what we get out of this extremely high throughput, to rebound on what Algorand was saying earlier, is we can run richer applications. So historically, a lot of these virtual machines that have been used for blockchains have been quite small. And there was two reasons for that. One was the need to have something that could be, I would say, easily verified, that was small. But we moved away, I would say, in terms of demand from applications that wanted to be extremely decentralized, and as such, they needed to have these very, very strong guarantees on the quality of their code, to applications that were really decentralized. And for those applications, they've been much more concerned with developer experience than they have with basically guaranteeing the security of their immutable code. And so for that, being able to onboard mainstream programming languages like Python, JavaScript, that's something that you get out of having this extremely high throughput. You just have more execution capacity. And so the fact that the developer experience is going to be tied to scaling is one thing I'm very excited about.
We also have the Bitcoin Cash podcast in here. Feel free to also come in on that topic too.
Yeah, so when it comes to governance, the Bitcoin Cash community has probably more hard-won experience than that with it, and than any other coin, coming from the original split from BTC, and then there was a split with BSV, and then the split with XCC. So the Bitcoin Cash community has really had to learn the hard way how important and how difficult it is to build consensus on an upgrade, or any kind of governance in a decentralized manner. And in the last 3 or 4 years, we've been seeing actually huge success. There hasn't been any further splits because the community now has the so-called chip process. Obviously, everybody knows the BIP process, the Bitcoin improvement proposals. Well, the Bitcoin Cash community has the chip process, which is similar, but it's designed, instead of being a confused mess that nobody really knows how it works, instead somebody has to take specific ownership of a proposal, and they have to build consensus by developing evidence, firstly for the strength of their proposal, and then secondly from other major stakeholders in the ecosystem over a defined 1-year timeline. And then as the deadline approaches, it sort of becomes obvious whether there is or isn't contention about that. And as the deadline approaches, you also get a sense for whether there needs to be any delay until the next year. Now, the big success at the moment is last year we had cash tokens, was a huge upgrade, adding fungible and non-fungible tokens, as well as scripting to the protocol. And the next one, which we have coming up, is May the 15th, is the adaptive block size limit algorithm, ABLA. At the moment, BCH has a 32 megabyte block size cap, but for scalability, eventually that's not going to be enough. So the community have developed an algorithm that intelligently responds to how much on-chain traffic there is and raises the limit appropriately, but without just taking all the limits off and kind of screwing over any infrastructure providers who need to have a stable roadmap. So that's something I'm really excited about.
I definitely want to dive more into that reserve currency topic as well, for those that have just joined the space. we have a whole panel of leaders from across the blockchain industry to discuss cross-chain interoperability. In the cryptocurrency space, we're going to talk about the future of evolution within these protocols and maybe a little bit about the regulatory landscape and more. But for now, let's move on to interoperability some more. What do you
By the way, you guys can feel free to keep commenting, and I'll be able to keep track of the chat, and we'll put stuff on screen. So anything you find interesting, I know it's like the intro parts are often a little dull. So hopefully we're going to get into it now.
believe are the most significant challenges in achieving cross-chain interoperability in the cryptocurrency space, and how do you propose addressing them? Anybody can take it. If not, John, I would
Yeah.
love to hear your answer.
Yeah, I'll take it. And I just want to mention Charles brought up input endorsers. I remember working on that when I was working with Charles and the team at IOHK on Cardano, and it's so great to hear that such a revolutionary technology is coming to the mainnet soon. Cardano, of course, uses the EUTXO model rather than the account-based model that, for example, Ethereum and Algorand use. And so input endorsers is going to be a tectonic shift in the number of transactions that Cardano will see, whilst still enjoying that EUTXO model. So really the culmination of not only a ton of academic research, but also state-of-the-art engineering. And so fantastic. Congratulations to Charles and team on that. What I would say is, interop is critical, right? Algorand's had, I don't know, something like 400 million transactions this quarter. That's a 3x increase over the last quarter. That's great, but it's still siloed, right? We're still living in this siloed environment without interoperability. And blockchains, they are networks not only of value, but also, I think, of social interaction and social movement. And so, for me, connecting these things is as important as connecting with people in real life. It is, we don't function well when we're isolated. And so I think it's critical. And so there's a number of different ways, of course, that we can approach interoperability. I think that the kind of nirvana state, or the optimal state, is where we're able to trustlessly and effortlessly with very little technical overhead, bridge assets and bridge value between these networks. And so technologies that we have pioneered at Algorand, and for example, like state proofs, which use post-quantum signatures to be able to prove the state of transactions on Algorand and trustlessly bridge, or indeed, again, from my experience working on Cardano, technologies like Mithril, which I'm sure Charles will jump into, allow this type of thing to take place.
By the way, I really wish I could speed this up, but every time I speed it up, there's no 1.25 speed, unfortunately, but 1.5, a lot of these guys just talk way too fast. Most of them, it's kind of funny because they talk about twice the speed as the blonde broker does. She's about half speed. So if I 1.5x when she's speaking, it's about even with everybody else, which I think is interesting.
I think the biggest challenge, though, it's stopped being the bridging piece, right? It's not the mechanism by which you move the assets between the chains. For me, rather, listening to people in the industry over the last 6 months to a year, it feels like the biggest challenge is cooperative standards. And so, as an example, of course, all the different chains are a little bit different under the hood, and they represent assets a little bit different under the hood. But if we could have consistent data models that require little transformation when you're moving assets between chains, so that if I can take an asset from Algorand and I can move it onto Cardano in a way that I don't have to heavily parse and reconstruct the data model when it reaches Cardano, that's useful. And so what does that require? Well, it requires us to come together, like we're doing with Hedera on DREC, and agree a common standard across chains without having, say, partisan standards. And so I think we're starting to.
We broke that news here first, by the way. At least that Hedera and Algorand were working together. That John Woods was in talks with Lehman Baird, and that they were working on something together. We broke that here on the channel first.
See that type of behavior begin. I think this space is another example of it. DREC was an example of it, and I think it's wonderful when we work together like this. We afford a more efficient path forward, because we end up in a place where we're defining standards together. And I think if we do that, we will make the journey of interoperability a lot easier.
I have a few things to add if we have the time.
Yeah, of course. You don't have to ask me twice.
Oh, okay. I always enjoyed working with John. He's just there's so much conciseness and clarity in how he presents things. The Algorand community actually is a great one, and there's wonderful scientists there. And from time to time, we even co-author papers. Like he mentioned Mithril. We actually worked on an upgrade for Mithril with an Algorand researcher, Leo Raisin, and we wrote a paper called ALBA. But to separate forest from the trees, when you talk about interoperability, you have to take a step back and say, what exactly are you trying to be interoperable about? So you can either move data, users, or value between chains. So are we trying to observe something that happened outside of our ecosystem and have a high fidelity representation of that injected in? So it's kind of like an oracle. Users are people. So how do you, for example, use multiple blockchains at the same time in your dApp? And then values is what we canonically think about when we think about interoperability. It's like, well, how do I move an asset from one chain to another chain? Like Bitcoin goes to Ethereum, becomes wrapped, or Tezos is able to receive ADA, or vice versa. So as John pointed out, this is a complicated issue because there are the technological things we'd like to do, but the reality is those take a backseat to the standards. And the problem right now is that there's very little incentives for chains to work with each other. And in many cases, we're replicating what happened in the 1990s with Microsoft, where they had ActiveX and all these other technologies which are just horrific. But they didn't care too much about embracing open standards like CSS and HTML and other such things. So EVM is a great example of that, where Ethereum is kind of the 800-pound gorilla. And there's legitimate reasons to use the developed model of Nicholson or Plutus or do things like they do on Algorand, which are distinctly different from the EVM. But a lot of people say, oh, now we just only want to deal with EVM. And it's like saying, well, every app has to be written in JavaScript. That would be a patently absurd thing. You pick the best tools and you pick the best technology for the task at hand, not just because somebody said so. So there has to be a little bit of give and take. And the good news is that there's been tremendous progress in some foundational technologies, which the difficulty is for us as engineers to figure out how to apply them, but the end user experience is getting better. For example, recursive snarks and rollups. There's been massive progress in the last 3 years alone, which allows you to start basically taking an entire blockchain and reducing it into a compressed proof. And then you can start injecting those around, and then you can start proving properties about transactions or information or whatever you care. So you start getting to a higher degree of trustlessness. But in some cases, you just can't get there because the underlying chain doesn't support that. And even if you have it, it doesn't have the ability to validate it. So there's a lot going on there. For our part, we've been pushing a lot for standards across the industry. We push for identity standards like DIDs, and it looks like that fight has been won. So we now have a universal identifier of people across the industry, that the DID standard, and most blockchains are able to comfortably work within that framework. I think rollups and recursion will lead eventually to a state where we actually have a trustless ZK bridge solution between different chains. So that's a good step forward. And in terms of the Oracle
ZK bridge being zero knowledge bridge, and actually zero knowledge stuff, I really like what SWI is doing with zero knowledge login. I think I've talked about that like a million times, but I really like that, and I hope we see more of that kind of stuff.
Problem. There's still a lot of open questions on how to move information, and what will probably end up happening is you have a family of standards, and we end up having to have some meta interoperability between those family of standards. But I'm incredibly optimistic, and I've become very involved in this problem because of the partner chains model with Cardano. We now have these partner chains we're building with the substrate framework, and they have to talk to other blockchains like Bitcoin or Ethereum or other things. And it would break my heart if the only way they could do that is through a multi-sig trusted bridge with a high degree of risk to the user, and it works until someone steals the money, like what happened with Nomad or something like that. I would like for all these things to be fast, efficient, cheap, and trustless, and relatively reliable with a good user experience. And believe me, I would much rather just have an open standard we take and we integrate, like an IBC or something like that, as opposed to having to figure all this out. But unfortunately, the technology is a bit fragmented across the industry. So you kind of have to take it on a case-by-case, blockchain-by-blockchain basis. The good news is on the research side, there does seem to be a heck of a lot more collaboration and discussion. We talk to everybody except for some of the Bitcoin maximalists, but outside of that, even the Ethereum crowd is starting to become much more open, and there's a lot of very productive academic and technical discussions about things. And so that leads me to believe that we as an industry will solve it end to end from a technological viewpoint. And then standards are probably going to be set economically, and winners and losers will materialize, and you just have to accept them for what they are. You accept Wi-Fi for what it is. You accept Bluetooth for what it is. You don't try to change it unless it makes a lot of sense in your ecosystem.
Just to touch on that Bitcoin Maxi point a little bit, Charles, something I've been watching closely, which is really rather exciting to me, is BitVM. So BitVM is coming to life on Bitcoin, which is really like an optimistic on-chain proof of off-chain compute. So you have a whole raft of Bitcoin L2s coming to life based on that and other tech models. And many of those L2s are likely to be EVMs. And many people are looking at ZK rollups or other ZK approaches there. So I think we're going to have bridges back to Bitcoin as well in a way that didn't seem possible at all not very long ago. So that's pretty exciting too.
Yeah, I'm going to take a look at Tree++ and a lot of the things that they're bringing to the table. BitVM is, we kind of know the legacy of it. There was Russell O'Connor with Simplicity, and there were a lot of papers that were written in the last 10 years about how one would bring either directly to Bitcoin or indirectly to Bitcoin more expressiveness in Bitcoin script. And so Tree++ is the language of BitVM, and it seems to have all kinds of capabilities that you just don't have in Bitcoin script. And the big test for us is going to be if we can implement some form of a ZK recursion with it that we would then be able to use as a bridging mechanism between Bitcoin and Cardano. So that's where we're going to get all of our familiarity. And I'm very also curious about the trust model of how BitVM embeds itself into Bitcoin. I read the original white paper that came out a few years ago, but I think it was Robin Linus that wrote it. In the legacy behind it, because it's not just one paper. There's been a lot of discussions about this in the Bitcoin ecosystem for over a decade. But I'm not sure about the security model. We haven't really done a deep dive, but we will when we do the bridging. But I'm very optimistic that might be actually something that gains some traction, because it's incredibly unsatisfying to say the only way you can get Bitcoin in and out of Bitcoin is through a multi-sig bridge. That would be horrible if that's the end state of that.
Yeah. So on my end, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Arthur.
Oh, thank you. So I agree that people talk about interoperability and they know they want it, but they don't exactly know what it is. They say they feel like they want interoperability, and it's very, very different to say that you have interoperability, for example, of virtual machines. So that if you develop an application on one chain, you can use it on another chain. That's one form of interoperability. It could also be interoperability of API and standards, and those are quite important for tooling and middleware integration. And then there's a whole other type of interoperability, which is much harder to achieve, which is this cross-chain communications. And the problem fundamentally, and one of the things that I would say is like a key characteristic from a business perspective of the space, is that cross-chain communication is extremely difficult to do securely and possibly impossible to do securely. So you're never going to have the level of security you have on a single chain as soon as you try to cross a bridge, and that's regardless of the bridges. You start making assumption. So sadly, most bridges today are completely custodial. They are multi-sigs. Rollups have the possibility of having non-custodial bridges to the blockchain that they're built upon. So that's great. That's a way of getting some interop between different chains. However, I would say Polkadot has something that looks like rollups with their parent chain, but all the rollups today that have been implemented in the SRM ecosystem are entirely custodial, meaning that there are some entities controlling the keys and controlling all the users' assets. It's very difficult. So the closest thing we've seen have been things like Polkadot, have been things like the Cosmos ecosystem with IBC. But even with IBC, you lose something fundamental. So you have something that's better than a multi-sig because it's essentially the whole set of validators that act as notaries to what's going on the chain. And there's a good Vitalik Butter an article on this around bridges. The difficulty, what you lose with bridges is you lose the flexibility of forking. Hard fork is an important protection that exists for blockchain. It's one that should be used extremely sparingly. But once in a while, it does become very useful. And if it does protect the security of chains as a last resort in an effective way. That does not work across bridges. Right? If you have to hard fork, it will not burn. And that's why a lot of the bridges, including, so because of their complexity, a lot of light client bridges. So IBC, I would call that a light client bridges. All of light client bridges now are being implemented as ZK rollups, but you'll find that all of the ZK rollups still have some trapdoors. They'll have some form of multi-sig to change the circuit because, well, the chain might fork and the implementation might fork, and you might see some issues. And so I'm not sure we're going to see truly secure centralization bridges. At the same time, the signal sent by the markets so far, and I think that can change in the future, but the signal sent by the market so far is that they do not care, including when bridges get hacked for hundreds of millions of dollars. That has had very little impact. And I think it just speaks to the lack of substance sometimes of the industry at this stage. It's something that matters enormously if this industry is going to count for something, and if it's going to have this very important and meaningful use cases. That's not something that's going to work. But today, I would say people are extremely comfortable with these very, very custodial solutions which sell themselves as interop.
I'm not as pessimistic, but I do agree with Arthur that there's tremendous engineering challenges that still remain, and there's unfortunately a tendency in our industry to cut corners, where people basically hide the complexity from the user, and almost always that is some form of centralization that's embedded in. So there's some form of a governance key or a multi-sig, if anything, just to update software. Now, with respect to zero knowledge being used in this, it's a broader class of computer science called verified computation, and basically you have programs and you want to prove properties of the program. So when you look at a blockchain, it's both a history and something that's actively running. And so the question is, can you roll up that history and prove properties about the state in a concise structure that mathematically is much smaller than the entire blockchain? And so we certainly have in the industry technology to do this. And there's many projects that are even trying to chase us at the layer one, like Mina, for example, and I think Plumo resulted in Cello. But then the devil's in the details about the upgradability of it, the trust assumptions of it. And he very rightly brings up something only a few engineers really think about, which is your hard forkability. So even if you get these things to work the way you'd like them to, the minute you change your consensus algorithm or you change materially significant things in the semantics of the system, the proof systems all go to hell. And that's usually you need some form of upgradability in those systems. But the minute that you have that, that's actually a vector of attack to steal things from the bridge. So it's a super, super hard problem. The good news is there's a hell of a lot of people that are working on it. The bad news is the appropriate approaches don't seem to be getting rewarded by the marketplace. It seems that the ones that are basically best user experience or most adoption are not connected in any way to the security of the system. Also
the way that is what I've been saying. That's what I've been saying all along. It's one of my biggest frustrations in crypto, and just one of the biggest things I just don't get is why the projects that seem to function the best aren't rewarded in the market. I don't really understand it. I guess they don't either.
Layer approaches. So never use just one security paradigm. It makes a lot of sense to use things like trusted hardware and perhaps multi-party computation protocols. You can layer these things together, and typically the layers of security give you additional assurance that the system is going to work well. But of course, then it adds more complexity, implementation time, and you also have a lot of downstream considerations. Whenever you upgrade a protocol, you have to then potentially do a lot of work to keep that bridge relevant. So it is the biggest problem. I think interoperability is the hardest because there's no one size fits all solution for it. And people who are asking for it seldom really understand what they're asking for.
Yeah, I think as well the Mina SDK, I've looked into it a little bit. I spent a little bit of time talking to Phil Kelly, who's their head of kind of BD and product, and it's very sophisticated, and you can really express some very sophisticated circuits quite in a quite straightforward way. And I think to your point about layered approach, another one of the supposed zombies, Monero, one of my personal favorites, probably the only used privacy coin, not a zombie in my view, also takes that approach, right, of layering, ring CT, ring SIGs, bulletproofs, stealth addressing, etc., to achieve its privacy. So I agree with that.
That's what I thought. That was one of the weird inclusions. Monero, including Monero, and it seems super weird because its whole function is to be a privacy coin. So as long as it's being used, right? Like the idea that there's not supposed to be developers on top of it. It just that one I thought was a really strange inclusion
as an architectural approach.
One of the things I wonder is if maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit as an industry in terms of trying to run before we can walk, and that's what's leading to all these hacks and issues. Like, for instance, the DEX ecosystem is still actually quite basic. It would be really nice if users that had been onboarded through a centralized exchange then never needed to go back out or to use those centralized exchanges. They could just hop from one chain to another via something like Thorchain, but we're not even really seeing that. So I think people try and jump immediately to how can we make complicated engineering protocols that let you do all kinds of fancy stuff between chains. But even just swapping assets in a decentralized manner, chain to chain, is still really underexplored. And I honestly think we should be more focused as an industry on getting those things right before we try and do more complicated stuff that will also build the sort of social cohesion among chains for those more complicated projects too.
Yeah, well, embedded within the interoperability problem is a broader problem, which is proving properties of the chain in general. So, the problem with blockchains and the kind of the hidden truth in the ticking time bomb of them is that adoption actually kills your security model with the Satoshi model of security. Because if you have billions of users doing billions of transactions every day, your blockchain grows to petabytes and exabytes of size, and your mempool is gargantuan, and the network requirements to run the system is gargantuan because it's a replicated resource. So everybody participating and maintaining the system has to have equivalent resources. This is not how distributed computing works. It's not the case when you run ChatGPT or you run Claude or you're running the Googleplex that every server is replicating the same thing, working on the same task. It's a distributed program, and you're load balancing amongst all the servers, and different servers do different things, or else you gain no benefit from having racks and racks of computers. Well, there's a natural question to ask, well, how do we move from a strict, evaluated, replicated, homogeneous world to a heterogeneous world where all the nodes are different, they have different resources, they work on different tasks, and they're also lazy in that they don't compute everything, but rather just what's relevant to them. And then on demand, they're able to discover things. And this is really where the whole zero knowledge space is being tapped heavily, where you almost have two blockchains now. You kind of have your main chain, and then you have kind of another chain that's floating around somewhere with some relationship to it, which is a chain of proofs. And they have some sort of security model behind how they're generated, but those proofs then allow nodes to navigate their interface with the chain. So mining, for example, we wrote a paper called log space mining in the proof of work world that actually allowed a light client to mine with the same level of security and certainty as a full node. And also we had a different paper called NEPA-POWs, which created a whole mathematical primitive for that. But in general, the idea is that, hey, maybe you should have to have the whole blockchain participate in consensus. And there's equivalents of this in the proof of stake world. Well, it's the same when you talk about bridges, but it's also the same when you talk about light clients. So if I have a cell phone wallet, what level of security can I get without possessing the entire blockchain? And when I see an incoming asset transaction or assertion in general, for example, you send me an NFT or you send me a cryptocurrency, what type of questions am I going to have about that? Has it been double spent? Does it exist? Is it counterfeit or real, et cetera, all these types of things. So the whole broad topic of proofs, it's absolutely required for mainstream adoption. Because the reality is the vast majority of people using these systems will be using them from a perspective of a light client and using them from a perspective of a lazy view, where they only know at any given time a small amount of information about the system. And if the system is going to sustain itself and not converge to hyper-centralization, all of those clients also have to participate in the maintenance of the system somehow. And that's really the super hard part that we're facing. And it turns out that the interoperability problem is somewhat similar to that, because if you only have a small view of your universe, well, then it's kind of the same as saying you only have a small view of the Tezos blockchain or the Ethereum blockchain or the Bitcoin blockchain from a Cardano perspective. They're all kind of the same set of problems. And the issue is, as they get more semantically complex, that view gets harder and harder to have assurances about. So we're trying to sort that out, but it's a hell of a problem to sort out.
So what I'm hearing, I have a couple more questions too. You're all kind of working on fostering innovation and development together, right? For us to truly get this cross-chain interoperability. What are some potential risks or drawbacks maybe associated with this play within decentralized systems, and how could we maybe mitigate those effectively?
I think the risk, of course, in any of these systems is that they're sufficiently sophisticated in order to do things like trustless bridging, or as Charles mentioned earlier, things like recursive snarks, proving the state of a very large data set in a very succinct fashion, i.e., gigabytes or potentially terabytes represented as hundreds of bytes. And so I think probably the most obvious concern is that you got to make sure your engineering is correct, or you're going to have very serious issues. One of the things that people can enjoy about centralized services is that, largely speaking, when things go wrong, you can pick up the phone, speak to someone, and they can twiddle their back end and sort of overwrite the line in the database to make sure that everything's okay. And I think and suspect that proper, not only proper architecture, but also things like formal methods, so mathematically proving the correctness of the implementation of these kind of trustless bridges and trustless interoperability layers using something like COQ will be expensive and time consuming. And so I would say that's one of the risks, certainly.
I think one of the risks is going to be in resource allocation. Every ecosystem only has a limited amount of resources internally, in terms of money, in terms of developer time, in terms of tooling. So when you want to be building something interoperable, you don't want to be fighting on two fronts at once. You don't want to have problems internally at the same time as you're trying to cooperate with someone else. So I would say, actually, ironically, one of the most useful things that each ecosystem can do to be prepared and facilitate flourishing, cross-protocol standards and so forth, is to make sure that their own internal thing is all very well put together and very well funded, because if that's the case, then it's going to be much easier to collaborate with other ecosystems.
Jeremy, you were talking about DEXs and things of that nature not being interoperable yet. I mean, we all want to live in this utopian interoperable world, but where does the responsibility really lie? Because I know, like, for example, Ultrade, they're doing everything they can as far as the DEXs go to be interoperable. But is it the builders, responsibility to go out there and focus on this next gen tech that will allow interoperability, or should the users also be held accountable to, push the space and say, we need this, we want the space to move forward in an, interoperable way?
It has to fall on the entrepreneurs, right? So within an ecosystem, it's up to the entrepreneurs to recognize the demand of end users, and then for an ecosystem specifically, like so Bitcoin Cash in my example, I think you need to have the right people working on the problem. You don't need 10 different people all trying to solve the same problem at the same time, but you need the right people who are actually reliable and who follow through on it. So that's kind of similar to my earlier point that I was saying, is I think like the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem, I spend a lot of time trying to make sure everything internally is running as smoothly as possible, because once you have that baseline, once you're in a good place, then you'll naturally find people who start to come in from other ecosystems and they want to bridge their assets as a result of that, right? So then they'll start demanding better DEX integrations, and then you have the opportunity for an entrepreneur. So that's how I see the flow that leads to somebody being the one to really take responsibility and say, I'll be the one to make and maintain this integration.
I think in general, the story around interop, and again, if we're talking about interop around like moving assets from chain to chain or moving data or information, it's linked to the scaling story. Because fundamentally, I mean, you might say that some people might be attracted to certain ecosystems for reason X and Y, but a lot of what's been going on is that the existence of many ecosystems has been, well, part of it has been about diversity of ecosystem, but also it's been about scaling. And sometimes you scale by having all these different ecosystems, which each of whom is able to offer a certain amount of block space. And so you need to go between them because you want to have these different virtual machines, these different environments, and somehow they all need to communicate with each other. And I to a large extent, that's something that's is solved by, if it's done properly, not the way it's currently being deployed on, I would say, the Ethereum ecosystem. But if you properly do rollups, whether they are validity rollups or TUC rollups, then you get that. You essentially get interoperability because they can trustlessly communicate via the L1. You get the customization. You could build an application rollup. You could build a rollup with pretty much any logic you want, and they get to communicate. So you really have this aspect. And I wonder how much of the need for interoperability between L1 remains once we have scaling. I wouldn't say it goes away completely, but I would say a lot of the story for a lot of the ones, the story around scaling, which is why we've been extremely focused on scaling and on rollups, because it's an important part of bringing the diversity that people want in terms of ecosystem, but also a secure way of communications. And I don't know that we'll see this secure communication happen in a medium or even long term between rollups, despite all the efforts, despite all the investments made. For I would say the fundamental reason that I outlined earlier, which is that consensus in some sense is not very portable between one place and another.
So are you kind of suggesting that, like, in a world where you have perfectly scaled layer ones, you kind of essentially no longer need interoperability?
I would say that it becomes a lot less relevant. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I think, though, that I know this may sound like a basic take, but you're still going to have these massive silos of value, right? Because you're going to have certain people who are just aligned, either philosophically or indeed, from a brand perspective with certain networks. And I think that it's definitely going to be, well, in my personal view, it's always going to be a requirement to bridge those networks of value and those networks of social interaction. If you want to,
I don't disagree. I think I agree with that. I think I agree with that. But I think that's part of it. Part of it is scaling, and the scaling part goes away, and you keep this brand part that you mentioned, which is a really good way of putting it, I think.
Yeah, I'm with John from the perspective, being in the space for 12 years, blockchains are collections of trade-offs. And those trade-offs are usually connected to a community and a collection of use cases and a philosophy that sit behind them. So interoperability.
That's a really important point, by the way, that blockchains are a collection of trade-offs. That is 100% quotable right there, because you're always making some trade-off in terms of scale, usability, number of factors. If you make too many, there's a trade-off to, in fact, life is trade-offs, by the way, guys. Life is trade-offs. So there's no perfect solutions, only trade-offs. That's a really important concept for life in general. Also applies to blockchains.
Ability is in many cases not even just about the technology, but it's also about the philosophy and community and people's freedom and ability to move from one philosophy to another. Like, for example, does your blockchain allow you to freeze transactions? Does it allow you to reverse transactions? Does it allow you to take?
Here we're seeing an example of Twitter interoperability.
Did he rug?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I think Charles might have rugged.
Charles definitely rugged.
Charles rugged. Okay, we'll give him a second, even if he has to hop down or come back in. Charles, we need you. It looks like he might still be talking, actually.
Can you can hear me though? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, John, we hear you loud and clear. This is what happens, Aaron, when you've been in the space for 12 years. Like, I think I'm the only other person that feels that. Like, we get a little bit older, a little bit slower. We might have to drop down, catch our breath, and come back up. That's all it is.
I like this point about different philosophies. I really think that's so true in the crypto space, that every community develops organically its own different vibe and culture to a certain extent, right? So crypto is very, multicultural in that sense. I really like that. So that makes me think of like international diplomacy. Maybe that's an area we need to be looking into. Right. Those guys have spent the last few thousand years figuring out how different cultures can cooperate. So maybe that's an area somebody needs to find international diplomacy textbook and get back to it with the answer.
And Jeremy, like, you're so right about that. And Bob, like, I've hosted with Bob before, about ETC and things like that. And I love that community because they don't focus only on themselves. It's about, sharing the knowledge, making sure they're welcoming other people. Like, ultimately, that's what we need in the space, is all of these different chains, these L1s, to actually be welcoming to other chains instead of just living in their own silos. And that's why I asked the question: is it up to the builders, or is it up to the the audience, the users, everyone really? Because unless we build healthy cultures around these different L1s, we're all screwed, guys. I'm sorry to say that.
Well, I'm gonna say it's up to me to reset the room right now. Okay, here we go. Oh, Bob unmuted.
Yeah,
if you guys,
could I suggest that maybe we do some Q&A as well?
Yeah, I think so as well. I know you recommended that, so for sure we'll do a little Q&A, and then I think, you know, continuing this forward when we do more spaces in the future, we should, you know, be welcome to opening up our panel the last 30 minutes, bring up some guests to come up and ask questions. You know, I'm with you guys here for everything. I completely support you. The most impressive thing I've done this month was maybe remember to feed my cat. So thank y'all for having the space. While we reset the room real quick and continue on for another half hour, I know I only have a few of you for a little bit longer. Make sure you're commenting at the bottom right hand corner. If you have any questions or you just want to show some love and support to the space, please retweet out the room. Follow all of the speakers up here as well. We've been talking about interoperability and how it is essential for blockchain technology and decentralization to really reach its full potential. We're connecting these different blockchain networks and allowing them all to work together. We're smoothly boosting advantages here, and couldn't have done it without all the speakers. And we can't do these spaces without the listeners and all the audience members. So thank you guys for attending. Bob, I want to kick it back over to you too. And I do know we've got a couple more questions.
Is there anything specific?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have a ton of questions. I guess my next question for you, and this could be good for future space topics as well. What kind of strategies do you believe are maybe essential for fostering collaboration and cooperation among different networks to achieve the seamless interoperability?
Well, I mean, you know,
I thought they were going to talk. I thought they were going to talk a little bit more about the zombie chain allegations, so to speak, and countering that. So I guess I'm a little surprised that that hasn't come up yet, and we're almost an hour into the space. That seemed like the fact that they're all part of that. I think it would have been good for them to address it. I hope they at least talk about that at some point here.
I think the primary thing is to be open to those conversations. You know, it's very easy to get stuck within, you know, your mindset or your set of core beliefs. You know, what are your shared delusions? Much of social scaling really comes from, you know, some set of shared beliefs. And I mean, ultimately, I'd say across the whole of the blockchain ecosystem, you know, we all have an awful lot more in common than we have differences. Twitter is not, you know, the be all and end all. You know, the conversations that we have here, you know, that's not all there is. I mean, I think that's a common you know, misconception that people have. We are also Twitter addicted and social media addicted. That it's very easy to think that the people that have those conversations on social media, you know, that is the community, that is your user base for a given chain, and that really isn't the case. You know, an awful lot of end users are using. That's their primary experience. So yeah, you know, I think it's just really openness, willingness to reach out in a lot of different ways as well. You know, different platforms, different approaches. I'm constantly amazed, for example, by people who will reply or get engaged from an email mailing list, something like that. You know, you have giant swathes of the world where email is their primary platform still. So yeah, I guess that's what I'd say. It's a lot broader than you'd imagine.
I'm still stuck on this point about international diplomacy. So it makes me think of how do they do it in the real world, such as they do embassies, right? You find the physical territory somewhere else, you put an embassy there, you speak to the local community, and you start running events, right? So the analogy here for cryptos is like I was recently talking on my show about going to other communities, physical events, you know, conferences and meetups, and if you can go and represent your chain at their conference, which of course requires you to be above board.
Okay, so seriously, I would have had, like, the first thing I would have asked is like, hey, make the case that you're not a zombie chain. You know, I think that would have been a really good way to kick this thing off, and also address the you know, I wouldn't say the elephant in the room, because it is, we all are talking about it. We know it's out there. I wouldn't even call it the elephant in the room, because the elephant in the room implies that it's like the thing that you're all noticing but not talking about. Although I guess it kind of is, because they're not talking about it. So I just find this really odd that they didn't address that. That seemed like the whole reason they got together with the space, right? Isn't it? I mean, I think, not that this is a bad conversation, it's getting a little dull, but I'm just really actually quite surprised that they didn't address this, because that would have been the first thing I asked. But anyway.
With the organizers of that conference, you know, you don't necessarily want to be distracting from the whole event, but if you can take a small team, have a small setup where your chain or your activity is able to be discussed, and then you go and engage in the rest of the conference and show yourself as a good faith participant and adding value there, then naturally people will have a small little foothold to come and talk to you too and say, oh wow, you know, I was here at a Cardano conference, but I saw you have this small little booth here, and that was really interesting, and maybe I'll look into that later, right? And that's like a long tail type approach where then it sits in the back of people's mind, and then over time, that's where the community collaborations grow from, and the interoperability that we were touching on before springs from that, because somebody at one of those booths says, oh, I'm in doing this project, and now I've met somebody from this project across the different chains, and now we can build a specific little bridge or cooperation there. So I think that's maybe one practical way to go about it.
Yeah, I love that concept of embassies. That's such a cool notion, and I have to kind of like interpret and get that a little deeper. I rugged and I made this like nice 5 minute soliloquy. It was, I think, completely lost, but I wanted to summarize it because it was I think relevant. You know, the Bitcoin maximalists, they keep saying the only thing that matters is Bitcoin and everything else should go to hell and burn all the altcoins to the ground. I mean, this is what they say, why they call us all scam coins. But really, when you think about why there are many blockchains, there are many blockchains because we differ not just on technology and utility, but also philosophy at the end of the day. So some basic questions like, can your chain censor transactions? Can your chain freeze transactions or freeze accounts? Can your chain reverse transactions? Can your chain steal your funds? What level of operational privacy do you have with your system? Is it Bitcoin style pseudonymity, or is it total anonymity like Zcash and Monero? Or is it every member actually has to have a government issued ID to participate, or a biometric scan like Sam Altman's work with WorldCoin? What as a dApp developer terms and conditions do you have? For example, does the network have the ability to deplatform your smart contracts or your dApp and prevent it from operating? Like, could Ethereum, for example, get rid of Tornado Cash, or can it just stay on the system? You know, these are some basic questions, and there are opinions that have a broad spectrum of what are appropriate and what are not appropriate. Freedom is about saying that you can have many of these things coexist with different philosophies at the same time. So interoperability is about being able to freely move between these different philosophies, whatever they may be, and being able to work in the chain that agrees most accurately with your worldview. That's why I don't think we're ever going to converge to maximalism and have one chain to rule them all. I think rather it needs to be an internet of blockchains. And I kind of do like the idea of embassies, because an embassy is more than just a bridge point. It's also a way of demonstrating the culture and philosophy of who you are. So Tezos has a culture, Algorand has a culture, Bitcoin Cash has a culture. It would be really cool for those cultures to be exposed to the Cardano ecosystem. And Cardano certainly has a culture, and we try very hard to showcase that to the rest of the industry. And we get a lot stronger when we actually learn how to listen and work with each other. And bridges and interoperability are about your ability to basically freely move between these different ecosystems and not get locked into any particular one, and vote with your feet about where you want to live and how you want to live.
Yep, I agree, Charles. And here's another thing. You know, these chains that we're all building, essentially they're operating systems, right? They're decentralized platforms for execution of code. And so at the end of the day, I use many different operating systems in my life, right? From embedded systems on appliances in my home, all the way to mobile systems, to gaming systems that are dedicated just for the execution of video games, all the way to the operating system on my television. And so, you know, there is very much a place for operating systems that do that rather have certain virtues and certain feature sets for the right application. And so for the same reason we have multiple operating systems and we use them daily, I think we'll certainly end up in a world of multiple high quality chains.
Now, here's a fun way to look at it. Do we want this to be a alliance base where, oh yeah, we're going to have an embassy in your chain because we get along? Or should we look more towards the UN model where we all know tons gets done all the time, but everybody comes together under one umbrella and actually gets things done as a team?
There's no way it's the UN model. It's definitely the embassy model, because that's the brilliant thing about the embassy model is you can start small, right? It has an organic bottom-up methodology of your chain, my chain, your country, my country. We just do a deal between us. It doesn't matter what is going on in the rest of the world, which adds overhead and communication lag and so forth. You and I just do a deal. We build a good thing, and then you start doing that somewhere else, step by step, right? And crypto is such a organically growing thing that would be the only feasible way in my mind.
Arthur, I kind of want to hear your thoughts on this and disrupting TradFi, right? How do you think maybe these advancements in cross-chain interoperability will impact the traditional financial systems and institutions?
Maybe, I mean, I would say it's easier to disrupt traditional finance on one chain than to try to do it on multiple chains. So let's try to successfully do that on one or several chains before we do it across multiple chains. That's just like adding complexity. But there is a relation. So the relation is that you have to wonder what do blockchains bring that can introduce this type of disruption to TradFi. And there's several levels of that. And at the most fundamental level, I would say at the most basic one, you have these properties of censorship resistance, permissionless innovation, seizure resistance. And that's a very strong, I would say, anarchic root of all of these networks. It's like you can really build something that's truly hard to censor, truly hard to seize. And I think it's very important that these use cases exist and that they're present. They are going to be limited in how mainstream they can be. That's the saying. It's like you can build something that's very, very resilient like that, and it's going to be fantastic if you're seeing a war zone or in other contexts. But let's say that you're, for example, you're a business, you want to start selling widgets on the internet, you want to raise money for your widgets and so on and so forth. You are not going to jump into a life of anonymity and an extreme operational security just because you want to sell your widgets online. So the question is like, for these use cases which are not actively censored and not actively pushed, does it still make sense to use this censorship technology? And I think yes, because we don't live in a binary world where things are either not authorized and you have to go into clandestinity in order to do them, or authorized. We've seen things like Operation Choke Point, for example. So there's a whole sort of all sorts of pressures and repression that exist, and censorship which are not which censorship also happens on a scale. But the other aspect which is useful for destruction of finance here, I would say, is that blockchains are fundamentally a global platform. They manage to cut through a lot of intermediaries, they manage to cut a lot of red tape, and the ability to access these global markets and these global audiences is, I think, what makes them interesting. And then again, now it's a story about interoperability. So one of the things that happened quite a bit on Tezos in early 2019 and late 2018 were STOs, so tokenization of real-world assets. There was a first wave, there's a new wave that's coming with real-world assets. And I think that when you look at it, sometimes people will say, well, if it's permission in some sense, because someone has to basically give you some right onto the underlying asset, right? You have a security token, that's a contract that gives you some claim on the asset. If there's going to be an intermediary that gives you this claim, does it make sense to use this underlying technology? And the answer is yes, because interoperability, because all of a sudden you can work with a network of custodians all across the world. Everything becomes portable, everything clicks together. That, I think, is a distinctive value prop of blockchain that exists outside of their very, very core censorship-resistant use case. And it has to do with interoperability, not necessarily cross-chain, but interoperability with intermediaries, with technologies, with API, with custodians, with lending platform, with trading platforms. So from that respect, yes, interoperability is important for these applications, but not so much cross-chain and more standards.
Yeah, the challenge with real-world assets in the legacy world is that these are radically incompatible with Web3. First off, if you have a physical thing, you can't really go reach your hand through the monitor, grab it, pull it into the digital world, and expect it to obey the properties of the digital world. So a great example would be tokenization of gold or tokenization of real estate. Your blockchain system is really good at creating an immutable, time-stamped, irreversible history of what's been going on about that asset. But somebody can physically just take the asset from you. They can steal the gold. A country can seize the real estate. And unfortunately, that local geography is always going to trump the digital geography. The second thing is regulation is radically incompatible with the common ethos that we've got from Satoshi and most blockchains follow about your level of control over your accounts. And we often say not your wallet, not your keys, not your crypto. Well, everything is not your crypto in the legacy world. You don't really control your bank account. You don't really control your stock account. When you work with a financial intermediary, not only do they have absolute dominion over your user experience, they're actually by law required to spy on you. It's called suspicious activity reports. So if you do things like structuring or other things, they notice some anomalies in your account, they actually have to go and tell a regulator, hey, Bob over there is doing something really crazy, or Alice over there is doing something really crazy. And crypto doesn't do that. Crypto is you're your own bank and you're self-sovereign, you're in control of your account. So I see a lot of people saying, hey, how do we bridge these two together? And it really requires some very heavy duty technology. You require private smart contracts because every real world business has a private side and a public side. Your public side is what the customer sees. Your private side is what you do for your business model. Like how much money is in the cash register at the McDonald's? How much money does it cost you to buy your fries? What deliveries are you making? Your customer list, all this stuff. Probably not going to publicly reveal that to everybody in the entire world unless you're required to by law. But yet, certain people within the organization know that. So you have this concept of selective disclosure and privacy circles and publicity circles. And then you also have to automate regulation. You have to get regulation into an algorithmic format. So settlement is compliance. Otherwise, what ends up happening is that all the regulation parts of your DApp or your DeFi application, let's say you're running like a DEX and you want to blacklist the United States, it'd have to be done manually through some off-chain centralized server. Now tell me, is that really DeFi if there's a gatekeeper who has God mode over the entire thing and they get to decide who gets in and gets out? No, we didn't sign up for that. What's the point of cryptocurrency then? Why not just go use E-Trade or something? Well, the whole point of permissionless is that you run it and it runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, asynchronously, and anybody can just interface with it and they can get what they want done with it. Well, and so this is the great challenge of our industry is what does that bridge look like? And those radical incompatibilities, which ones can be resolved and which ones can't be resolved? And then clearly telling the consumer that they're walking into a world that's actually centralized or controlled in some way.
That was a really good point, or series of points about real world assets, about the challenges between them, and also about centralization and decentralization. I think there is a balance, but he makes a good point. If there's gatekeepers, this was the problem I have with Gala. Like there's so many. The problem with Gala is like it's really kind of a gate-kept system. So I have, so I received Gala from one of the Townstar competitions, and I can't move it off there because they decided they had some transfer code that was separate from all the other codes, and one day it just stopped working. Just didn't work. So when Gala stuck on there, and people were like, and when I made my Gala is dead video, people got really mad at me, and they're like, and then of course the price happened to start going up of Gala, and people were like, oh, I bet you this aged well, huh? And I'm like, oh yeah, it aged great. You know why? Because like all my Gala still stuck on their platform and doesn't work because they have a gate kept system. So also like that's the problem. That's one of the problems with the gaming space is like they'll say, oh well, you can have this NFT and you can own it. It's like great. What all they have to, the game company still controls the game, so they can nerf it. They can nerf it in the game and make it useless, which is what happened to my Townstar NFTs. It's basically useless. It had a function. They turned off that function on the game side, so like yeah, it doesn't matter if I own it. Yeah, it's like great. It's like saying you can own a car, but they take away all the roads or something. You know, suddenly it's like, well, you can own your car, but you can't drive it. So Charles brings up some really good points here. In fact, I would say Charles and John have probably had probably the most valuable comments here so far. I'd almost waited. I really thought Charles had said some really thought-provoking stuff. I don't know if you've seen his Lex Friedman interview, but it's really, really good. Anyway, let's continue the space.
I disagree here. I think it is the most important point of the technology, but it's not the whole point. They can go beyond that. And is it DeFi if somehow there are controls? No, it's not. But does it mean that there's no value prop left? No, I wouldn't say that's the case. You have to trust someone. You're not going to have the same level of permissionlessness. It's not going to have the same level of freedom as you have with a normal blockchain. But it doesn't mean once you remove the thing that I think you remove that, you remove a lot of substance. That's true. But you don't remove everything. And the thing that's left, and that's interesting at the point I was making, is a form of global interoperability, which is in itself very useful. So I would say that you're not going to have anything that's close to things like holding Bitcoin or holding Tez. That's true, but you're also not going to have nothing. And fundamentally, the other part about finance is that finance has to finance something, right? So what if you are going to stay purely outside of the real world, you're going to be able maybe to have things like means of payments. You're going to have like stores of value, but you're going to run out pretty quickly. The whole point of finance is that it finances something. And if the only thing that DeFi finances is more DeFi application, it's circular. You have to be financing the real economy, or then you're not in the finance space. So if there's a DeFi space to be added whole, it's going to have to deal at some point with some kind of real world asset. Otherwise, it's going to be a circular game of music chairs.
Yeah, that's a fair point. But the broader point I'm making is this the consent component of it. So imagine a party where somebody just always invites themselves to the party and you have no control over it. They can drink the punch at any time and they can basically kick you out of your own house. And this is the modern finance world. There's a lender and a borrower. Maybe you and me, maybe we enter a financial relationship. I want to buy your house, or I want to invest in your company. Then suddenly some third party shows up and says, well, you guys should not be allowed to do that yourselves. I have to be involved in this whole thing, and you have to add all this bureaucracy and these additional layers of complexity. Oh, and by the way, I at any time can stop this relationship from happening. That's kind of the legacy financial world at its core. And what DeFi did is said, well, hang on a second here. There's a whole class of commerce where we don't need a middleman. We can do this completely peer-to-peer, and we can figure it out through an alternative dispute resolution and alternative settlement system. And what Legacy is trying to do is work its way back in and say that entire class of commerce should be banned, and we should still be in charge of all these things, even when it makes absolutely no sense. For example, we do microfinance in Africa. We have a company called RealFi that John O'Connor leads. It's one of our CEOs. And there, what we're trying to push for long-term is peer-to-peer lending. So in you and your wallet, you can open it up and you can see somebody in Africa and they have a blockchain-based ID and credit score, and you can make a decision whether you want to give them $50 and what the interest rate is. I don't need a financial institution between you and that person. That's a peer-to-peer relationship. And what the legacy world does is they say, no, you do, absolutely, 100%. Oh, and by the way, because you now have those third parties, we control the whole market. We decide who gets credit, how much credit they get, what interest rate that they pay, and we decide if these people are in an area with bad geopolitics, we're just going to punish every single person in that entire country. And they all suffer because we don't like the leader, and that's just the way things are. I think it's just absolutely immoral. Billions of people are excluded from the financial system as a direct consequence of it, and it introduces artificial market anomalies and market frictions that basically don't provide any value at all to consumers. Now, I do agree with you for the point that for most transactions, middlemen will eventually come in. The question is, did you choose them? Did you actually consent to it? And are they adding value to the transaction? When I buy something, sometimes I use a lawyer, and they add value because they give me advice on how to de-risk it and structure it in a way that's to my benefit. Now, what if you're told every time you buy something, a lawyer has to be present, whether there's value or not, you have to pay their legal fees? You'd say that sucks. But that's literally what the legacy financial world has encumbered upon society as a whole.
I want to chime in. I want to be mindful of everyone's time here because I know we're getting closer to the end of the space. I've got one more question before we shut it down and finish out right now. So I'm going to ask this question over to John. What are some upcoming key milestones that you guys have on your protocol's roadmap that everybody in here can look forward to?
So they're just not going to ask about the zombie chain. Why would you ask about that? I don't understand that. I don't know. It's just really frustrating. Like I think it'd be really, really good. And I know I'm kind of beating a dead horse now because I said it already, but I really think it'd be a good idea to ask about, hey, Forbes called you guys zombie chains. Make the case to us that you're not. Especially, Cardano and Algorand could obviously make that case, but I'm sure all of them could make that case to some degree. I thought that was the whole point of this, like get together, but okay, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share. So in terms, it's actually not on our roadmap just yet. So this is some spicy chili alpha for you. But we are going to be enhancing AlgoKit, our software solution for building apps in Algorand. So we've just added Python to that, of course, and so we're going to be enhancing that with visual debugging tools so that you can, in a very intuitive and visual way, watch the flow of your application through like a local net blockchain. And we're also going to be adding a second language. And Charles mentioned this earlier on. It's coming to Cardano, and it's wonderful. We're going to be adding TypeScript as well, using the same LLVM-like compiler pipeline that we've built for Python.
I was right. It was TypeScript.
But can you guys still hear me? Because my little the UI is being weird.
You sound good.
Very cool. Yeah, so we're kind of reusing about 80% of what we built to deliver Python to deliver a native TypeScript experience. And then, as I alluded earlier on, in addition to those enhanced developer tools and debugging, we're also going to be incentivizing consensus this year and moving to a peer-to-peer based gossip-style network using libpeer-to-peer, which will, again, all of these things are pushing Algorand to a place where it's easier to build, it's more decentralized, and it's genuinely more secure. And so afterwards, then, looking ahead to 2025, I think that the focus will be post-quantum. So we're going to be doing more work around our post-quantum cryptography strategy. So far we have added Falcon signatures, which are a lattice-based post-quantum signature scheme. And so far, currently they secure the history of the chain. So every 256 rounds, which is about every 12 minutes or so, or every 256 blocks, the protocol itself will issue a kind of checkpoint using Falcon to attest to, using a post-quantum signature, so a digital signature scheme that is, we think, immune to quantum attack. To attest to the veracity of the transactions and the blocks that are in the chain. So we kind of have some post-quantum security already, but we also need to start exploring a post-quantum VRF, because at the heart of Algorand's consensus is verifiable random functions. They use the ED25519, or Edwards 2519 rather, elliptic curve. And so that curve is not immune to quantum attack from Shores. So we're going to be looking at a PQ version of VRF. And also we might want to be exploring post-quantum signatures for accounts. So, for issuing transactions. But again, there's lots of, as Charles said as well earlier on, any engineering decision like this, there's trade-offs. So you bring post-quantum security, well, maybe your signatures are bigger than they used to be, your chain grows faster, or it takes longer to propagate the transactions or validate them, etc. So, all of these things need very careful consideration. But certainly we have a really rich roadmap to roll out over the next kind of year and a half or so.
Super exciting. We're going to have to do another space so that everybody else in the audience can definitely be filled in. Make sure you are following the Algorand account up here that we have as a speaker, as well as John Woods, the one and only John.
By the way, I do think this is a pretty good space and pretty interesting. So I don't want to totally bash the bond broker here, but it just frustrates me that seemed like a really obvious question to not ask, like a really obvious one based on what's going on. But this has been interesting. Like I said, Charles and John probably had the most interesting comments, but it was an interesting discussion nonetheless.
John Woods. Arthur, I also want to ask you the same question regarding Tezos. What are some upcoming milestones on your roadmap?
Sorry, but there's a few things. So first is the launch of mainnet. It's not a launch; it's a release on mainnet for integrations of Decentralization, which will be followed by launch a few weeks after that. So it's been a long time in the making, and it's a big release. It's very much about interoperability with the Ethereum world. The data availability layer or publication layer that's also coming is super exciting. So we are doing shared data availability. Essentially, it means that instead of having every validator download every single transaction, you now have validators download a small fraction of the transaction. It's really beautiful how it happens. You're essentially, and I'm not even kidding, this is a good analogy. You take your whole block, you make it into some sort of mathematical hologram, so that if you cut every little piece of it, every piece has a fraction of the whole block. You distribute that to all the validators, and then they can hold the chain correctly. So that massively increases the amount of transaction that you can push to rollups. So the combination of rollups and the data availability layer is how we scale. So it's been called they call it dank sharding in the Ethereum ecosystem. They call it they have some similar thing in the Ethereum ecosystem without the actual sharding. And what I find super exciting about it, it's not just the scaling that comes with it, is that it's fundamentally a decentralizing technology, because for the first time you have a task where the larger you are as a validator, the more stake you have, the more work you have to do, the more useful work you have to do. You have to store more data if you are going to validate the chain, if you're bigger. That's a very neat property, and that means you can scale. It's like as you increase the demands on data from the network, then essentially you scale by adding more capacity, by decentralizing more. So most forces in this industry push towards centralization. As soon as you pursue more profit or more efficiency, you tend to centralize. And here it's a force where demand actually pushes for decentralization. So that is super exciting. And then there's a work towards Tezos 2.0. I didn't really touch upon it, but the general idea is rollups are thought about in general as a horizontal scaling technology where you run many rollups, and we're thinking about it as a vertical scaling technology. So essentially, once you decouple the execution of the transaction from the actual base layer, you get a lot of nice properties. You get to use, you get to shard the data availability behind it. You get to use more powerful machines without compromising centralization. You then benefit from the ability to use more throughput, so you can have more mainstream programming languages as part of your stack, like Algorand was mentioning. So that's super exciting, and that's coming. I would say in the next 2 years, we're going to have a progressive rollout of this Tezos 2 plan, which I'm super excited by.
And Jeremy, what do you guys have coming up? Can you give us some alpha on Bitcoin Cash?
Yeah, so Bitcoin Cash, of course, doesn't have a roadmap because there is nobody who would be the central, foundation or party to decide that. Like I was talking about before, the community comes up with stuff based on the chip process, so you can read up on that if you're interested. But like I said, on May 15th this year, we have the block size limit increase, and also at that time, we're hosting a conference called BCH Bliss, where we'll be discussing, and we'll kind of get a vibe for what is likely to be in the next year. The two most upcoming things I think that people are interested in probably are VM limits. So a lot of the limits on the scripting capability of Bitcoin were set like way back in the early days, 2010, 2011 by Satoshi and others, and they haven't really been revised since. So the community has been investigating that quite closely because there's a lot of latent potential there that can be unlocked if we tweak those VM limits a little bit. So I think that's going to be on the not the roadmap, but that's going to be in the zeitgeist, let's say. And then also UTXO commitments, right? Everybody's always wondering about how you're going to run a node if it takes forever to download and verify the chain yourself. So just like in the white paper where it says, you can do simplified payment verification, where you can do that also if you embed a hash of the UTXO set into each block in the chain, so that then people can, instead of syncing from block 0 to block 800,000, they can start with 800,000 and already be verifying on the network and then backfill the rest in the background so that you could spin up a node much, much faster. That's also something that the community is really quite interested in. So I would expect those two to be discussed heavily coming up.
I just got to drop off. I'm really, really sorry, but I didn't want to drop without saying goodbye to everyone because I've just got another space I've got to jump to. But great to chat with you all, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, John. We'll see you soon. And
I also
but
have to drop off as well. So thank you so much for having me, and stay tuned.
No worries. Thank you, Arthur. And last but not least, we're going to pass it over to Charles for that last question, and we're going to close down this space.
All right, everybody's already left, so I can just ramble for 30 minutes now, right? Just kidding. Cardano, as I mentioned, it's scalability, interoperability, and governance, and the near and long-term roadmap has always revolved around making meaningful contributions in all three of those buckets. So right now on the near-term menu, it's just things like Ouroboros Genesis, which gives Ouroboros the ability to bootstrap for Genesis, and that really pairs with a lot of our peer-to-peer work that we've done. So that's a huge house of work, and there's some great companies like Tweak working on that alongside some core developers. With respect to interoperability, so the single biggest advancement is the ability to bring all the zero-knowledge technologies into the Cardano orbit. So Plutus V3 really does that, and then suddenly we have projects working like ZK Fold on rollups, and then there's a huge amount of work we've been doing with Gawa and with a library for the Zcash world called Halo 2. We're adding recursion and bringing Pluto Eris curves into our orbit. So I think we'll be best in class for recursive snarks, and also there's a huge amount of work that's being done on Mithril integration. Currently, it's kind of living in the user space instead of the kernel space, so it's not integrated with the blockchain itself. It's an optional thing, but the ability to pull that gradually into Cardano and actually get it into the chain itself is going to be a very powerful primitive, because then it allows you to do what Tezos is doing with their data availability layer, what Ethereum has been trying to do with the IP 4484 with dank sharding. So that's a huge step forward as well. Partner chains in general is just massive. I mean, that's literally merging not just one and another blockchain together, but it's creating a blockchain builder for the ecosystem, and our largest dApps for them to kind of ascend to that level and get our stake pools to actually mine and maintain the state of multiple chains at the same time. So you actually have to create a supernode for that. So there's a huge project going on along those lines, everything from the bridge technology to a dual token model for the partner chains frameworks, to figure out how those get listed on exchanges, to integration with Firefly, which is a Hyperledger project for supernodes. So that's been happening. And then our biggest work stream is the governance side, where literally we're constructing a government as an ecosystem that's completely decentralized from the ground up. So you have your congressmen, you have like DREPs, that's what they're called. You have constitutional committee, which is kind of like a Senate and a Supreme Court all at one. And then you have a constitution that has being written by the community right now. We even have a constitutional convention we're having down in Argentina, where people from more than 50 countries are going to attend and basically write a final form of a Cardano constitution that is both understandable in a human sense, but also a subset is machine understandable, and it constrains the behavior of the governance layer of the system. So this is a gargantuan work stream, and there's just so many people involved in all of it. And all these things are happening in parallel, in addition to the constellation of community-built technology or open source projects like Hydra or tools from TXPipe or alternative clients. Plus, we're building institutions. They just set up a members-based organization called Intersect MBO, and it allows all the different special interest groups to come together, whether it be the DeFi community or the NFT community, or it be people interested in oracles and stablecoins or whatever the user cases are. That's where they aggregate, and they actually talk about a decentralized roadmap for Cardano. Plus then the cross-chain collaborations. We already mentioned the Algorand collaboration where we work with them on ALBA, but there's a lot of cross-chain collaborations across the board, and in some cases cross-institutional collaborations. We still have a lab at Stanford, CMU, University of Wyoming, University of Edinburgh, Tokyo Institute of Technology, University of Athens, and others, 168 scientists with 209 papers that are written. And we work with standards bodies like the W3C, for the DID standard and all the identity frameworks that we're bringing into Cardano through Hyperledger with the Prism project, but also bigger standards bodies like the Department of Commerce. And we've been talking with NIST, ironically, about post-quantum crypto. So John Woods brought that up. I believe actually Algorand did contribute to some of the post-quantum crypto standards that the U.S. government's using. I think Falcon was in the consideration. So really impressive work that they've been doing. They've really brought a lot to the conversation. But he's right to point out there's an enormous amount that still needs to be done, like the post-quantum VRF, but frankly also post-quantum rollups and post-quantum recursion, because all the zero-knowledge primitives, except for Starkwares, actually live in the classical crypto sense. And unfortunately, when you bring them to post-quantum world, they're 100 times larger and 10 times more inefficient, and you get all this overhead for no real user value. It just defends you against this mythological quantum computer. So, and then we even do quantum research as well. So we just published a paper with Princeton called One-Shot Signatures, where we actually created quantum money and created a way to destroy signatures after using them a single time. And we actually held a workshop with the Ethereum Foundation of all people called QSIG earlier this year. So those collaborations will continue, and we'll continue scaling them up. So incredibly vibrant ecosystem, a lot going on, a lot of moving pieces. I'm a pretty tired guy. Cardano is so big that no one person can do anything, everything in it. You just kind of pick and choose your battles. And I try to focus on those three areas: scalability, interoperability, and governance, and make sure that we have a best-in-class view for how to get to where we need to go.
Let's see. All right. Okay. There. My mic is working. Everybody, if you made it through the space, I know we went a little bit over time. I just want to say thank you guys for listening and staying with us. At the end of the mint, we promised this at the very beginning of the space. At the end, there is a free mint up at the top of the space. This was in commemorization of the Forbes article, right? So these are the zombie chains that are biting back. This is a play on it. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful piece of art and NFT up the top. It's free. Guys, go grab it. Go scan the QR code. Just wanted to throw that out there, give everybody a little treat. We appreciate you coming. Thank you for the space. This was our mega cross-chain space that we had, and we're looking forward to all the future spaces that we do have. Like we said, we're all in this together. Loved hearing everybody's interpretations of interoperability, decentralization, and what we are going to be looking forward to in the future. With that, I want to let everybody say their farewells. We'll close it out with some music, and we will see you guys next time.
No.
Thanks for hosting, Aaron. It's been great. I really enjoyed it.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll come back to this in a second. I thought that was a really interesting space. And Tails, thanks for that comment on Viridis. We're going to look at that in a second. Really interesting space overall, though. Like I said, I've found it kind of frustrating that they didn't at all talk about the the elephant in the room, so to speak, the fact that these are all called zombie chains. And I think it sort of did prove the point. Here, this is manual. It still moves. Isn't that weird? It still did kind of prove the point that, a lot of stuff is going on in these chains. But I think that I would have liked to have heard them address that a little more directly. So I'm not going to go for real long, but I do want to show this, and I'm going to bring this comment up on screen. Tails brought this up, and hey, welcome to the stream. Thanks for watching and commenting. It says Viridis is something I'm looking for follow-up on. Back in 2021, Algo invested a good chunk of change in this Going Green initiative. Viridis roadmap on their site no longer exists in the future months. So let's take a look at this, because I pulled this up while the space was going. And I'm going to take the comment back down so we can read it. Algorand Foundation launches $300 million USD Viridis fund to support DeFi innovation. So I don't think it was actually a green initiative, because I read through this a little bit, but it says the Algorand Foundation is excited to launch the Viridis DeFi fund today. The fund will provide 150 million algo. So I'm guessing this is back when algo was $2, but $150 million algo fund to fuel the significant early growth of the DeFi ecosystem on Algorand. We'll be sharing more news and content on this innovative and exciting program over the next weeks. And the Viridis DeFi fund will also be featured as a dedicated section on our website. We'll go look at that in a second, because I don't. Today we're excited to share the first two super grants, which we know the grants program is gone now. So they might have just like referred. I kind of wonder. I'd like to ask somebody in Algorand, and I think I will, because I just want to find out. But I think this might have been the launch of and they just don't call it Viridis anymore. But they also got rid of the super grants program. They're doing a venture program instead, where the foundation has a little more involvement in it. But anyway, they were excited to share the first two super grants, which have been designed to support the creation of critical DeFi infrastructure, introducing the $5 million Price Oracle super grant and the Bridge super grant. Oracle super grant, 6 proposals for the integration of Oracle networks associated with price feeds. They have the option. And then the Bridge super grant is called for a proposal to build bidirectional bridges from Ethereum and other chains, which we did see some of that. And they chose Viridis because it means green, young, vibrant, fresh, to grow in Latin. And you know, since Algorand is supposed to be like this, you know, what they said, vibrant and growing, but also like a green network, kind of fits the whole ecosystem there. I wonder if it gets mentioned very much, because we have funding, but we don't have, you know, otherwise we don't really see Viridis mentioned anywhere there. So what happens if we go to funding? Yeah, the Algo Grant program has evolved and transitioned into vertical focused ecosystem funding. Referral-based ecosystem funding programs are now aligned with vertical with open calls for projects to submit their proposals. And these are the grant recipients. And I don't see anything that would be specifically bridging that we can filter. But these are some of the projects. One Circle, Xberry, Azure Tactics is on here, which I played. You know, I played a build of it in Decipher, which was about a year and a half ago. So I'm actually kind of surprised. It is available. If you go to Epic Games, there's a page for it. It's not live yet, but there's a page for it. So apparently it's being distributed through Epic Games. And you can go like show some support. Like I think you can click that you're waiting for it or something like that. It seemed cool, but actually, like I said, I'm a little surprised how long it's taken, considering it's, you know, we played it. I mean, it was playable. I played it with Crypto for Change at Decipher, and that was December 2022. So, you know, we're about a year and a half from that. A lot of the games I played at Decipher are gone. Like Cosmo Champs is still around. Alchemon is gone, or on break, or whatever they call it. What else? There was that. Shoot, what was it called? There's like this kind of space-based game, and I just can't. I'm just drawing a complete blank on it. I haven't heard anything from that. Avatars is gone. I really liked Avatars, and the game was playable. I don't know what happened with Avatars, because it was playable, it was working, and for some reason it's gone. But did you know there's an Algomon? God, can you guys stop making Pokemon clones, please? Algophi's on here. Is that one of the ones that disappeared? Yeah, there's Alchemon. They got grants. You might notice like there's a lot on here that I just haven't. There's avatars. Oh, see, I met the guy that's behind this. He also did the one-click nodes. He's a cool guy. I didn't love the game so much, but I think he's a good guy. He also does High Forged, which is a way to mint NFTs. There's a lot. There's a lot of grants that were handed out. Chain analysis. Circle got some grants. Like, is that the same circle? Dope Panda. I know the coin because it was on Yieldly for a while. DFly is pretty good wallet. Well, anyway, I don't want to go through all these today, but it'd be interesting to scroll through those. So my sense, no, I don't think. There we go. He said, Algophi is back. I think this is, they had gotten, because there was a lot of dead projects on there that got grants that didn't, obviously didn't pan out. Yeah, some of them are frustrating. Like, I don't understand why Avatars just wasn't live. Like, it was working. I don't know what the problem was. I don't know if they just didn't have enough money coming in to justify the web services, or what was going on there, because it was a great game. I actually really enjoyed the game. It was pretty simple, but that was kind of like what I liked about it. It was just a simple, fun game that had a lot of strategy. It was simple. The mechanics were simple, but the strategy was complex, which is what I liked about it. Yeah, so that's my sense of the Viridis program. I think that was what was funding the super grants, and I think they just completely went away from that. They went toward a model where it's a ventures fund model where they, well, in fact, I think they talk about it on here. Or do they? Yeah, well, they do. Yeah, they call it ventures, but they don't say it on here for some reason. They don't spell it out. I'm not really sure why. But it's more like where they're now a little more involved with it. And then there's some stuff where they were funding like block explorers. Like we showed that block.app. The other one, they were spending like, I don't know how much money, like millions per year. And I think the people that created it just assumed that was going to go on forever. And I just don't think you should ever make that assumption. But all right, well, the main thing was to get through that space. And like I said, I thought it was pretty interesting. Mostly, I thought the most compelling stuff came from Charles Hoskinson and John Allen Woods. And honestly, Hoskinson probably had some of the most valuable comments on there. I thought it was really interesting. I'm glad we went through it. I'm glad we got to go through it together. So anyway, guys, if you haven't already, please hit the like and subscribe button. As always, you don't have to smash it. You can just press it gently, but I really appreciate both of those things. Helps people see the channel. And I think we're heading up. So, I think this is a good sign. We're at like 19 some cents. I think we're going to start popping up. Altcoins, though, I think are a ways off. For real pumps, I think altcoins are probably toward the end of the year. We'll probably see Bitcoin really start pumping in the next, assuming this is always assuming. This is assuming it follows the standard pattern that it's always followed. So that's a factor, right? That's a factor. There's no guarantee of it. It's just likely because that's the way it's been doing all along. So Bayesian reason saying what happened before is likely to happen again, but not necessarily, not 100%. There's no guarantees. But I think if it follows the standard pattern, we'll see Bitcoin pump in another 2-3 months, and then we'll see altcoins follow toward the end. Maybe toward fall, based on what it's done before. So, all right, guys. Well, hey, everyone, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone got something out of that. I thought it was really interesting. And if you haven't subscribed to my Substack, it's frugalbc.substack.com. I have a link up above in the chat, so check that out. And yeah, that's it, guys. Take care. Have a good Sunday or a Saturday. I don't remember what day it is. Have a good Saturday. And you guys stay safe out there. Remember, not your keys, not your crypto. All right. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.